Episode 35 of 84 Feet with Cady and Cap is underway. I'm Brian Cady, and a setting you may have seen once or twice before. This is what happens when you're mid-packing for a move. Usual spaces get a little cluttered with packing and the such. So that's what's going on right now. So we're making use of the king chair in the bedroom right now. So that's all good and well. So this is the first real in-season episode of the podcast that's ever been done since the pod only started back in April of this year. And Cap and I got to thinking how we wanted to approach the in-season episodes, and we'll keep doing interviews as often as possible. But we also came to a conclusion that we needed to bring somebody in that really knows the lay of the land of Section 2, either as well or better than myself and Cap. And we thought, who better than the man behind Empire State Takeover? That's right, Jeff Mlinar. You have agreed to be part of this program throughout the course of the season, or at least as much as possible, because you are a man of many travels throughout the course of the season. So welcome on. We're glad to have you a part of the you've always been a part of the 84 Feet with Cady and Cap family, but glad that you're going to be a regular occurrence on the program throughout the course of the season. So thank you for taking us up on that, and welcome aboard. How you doing, man?
Not bad. Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to being on this winter. A great thing about the 21st century is no matter what schedules are like, technology's portable.
Absolutely. I love it.
I have no excuse as to what you have. Your excuse as to what's behind you. I have no excuse as to what's behind me. I've lived here for 3 years and I haven't put a single thing up on the wall. So,
dude, it's all good. I'm not judging. Nobody else is judging. They just want to hear ball. That's what they really want to hear. So, this past week, as we're recording on Monday, December 2nd here, this past week was really the amp up to lead into the season in bulk, really, as far as the regular season is concerned. This past week, I know you were bouncing from gym to gym for a bunch of different scrimmages pre-Thanksgiving, and then we'll jump into the post-Thanksgiving activities in a second. But out of the scrimmages you were able to check out over the course of the early part of last week, anything in particular stand out to you? Any team, any player, any different approach maybe from a team that you maybe were not used to seeing? What stood out to you?
I guess certain things stick out kind of in all their own ways. First stop this season was a visit to see the great Tom Galvin at Burn Knox Westerlo. They scrimmaged Watervliet. A little whack reunion in a sense, because Watervliet's coach, Kelsey Logan, was a standout at Fort Plain that was a little bit closer to my age. So that kind of, I remember those times a bit, and seeing Tom and Kelsey coach against each other. Burn's got a nice group coming back. They should be right up at the top of the WAC along with Northville. And, you can tell from a coaching, something that sticks out, maybe like from a coaching perspective, watching Burn, Tom's been doing this a while, and he's had a lot of success, and he's won a lot of games, and he's especially among, the small schools, everybody knows him, everybody respects him. And you see that approach as an experienced coach going into seasons with scrimmages where, sometimes when I watch scrimmages, I feel like teams have kind of worked on like 15 different things, but they haven't put real time into anything. So nothing looks, it just, nothing really looks good. Like, I'm not expecting for things to look good in November, but you can tell a lot of times when teams have worked on a lot of, many things, a small amount, Whereas, watching a team like Bern, I can tell that they've just kind of worked heavily. They've stressed heavily a couple things over the first week or two. And, especially on the defensive end, just principles and sorts of things that they're running and they're trying to accomplish, and style of play that they're trying to accomplish. And then, the offensive end wasn't really plays at this point. It was concepts. It was two-man game, working with a guard and a post. It was high ball screens. It was, it wasn't a deep playbook by any stretch at this point. It was just kind of focusing on concepts where I can see that there's just a couple specific things that they've really kind of stressed early in the season. They returned, I think everybody from last year. If not everybody, then just about everyone. They have, and they're going to be kind of a balanced group. They'll have 3 or 4 kids that'll lead them any given time, but they have an 8th grader that's worth keeping track of if you want to kind of get early eyes on future area standouts. They have 8th grade guard Molly Shaver, played varsity basketball last year as a 7th grader, started for him, but he's kind of putting it in their hands a bit more. You can see that right from the scrimmage and he's, that's something that Coach Galvin's done with stars in the past, like give them responsibility young, put the ball in their hands, let them succeed, let them fail. But, you're going to get a green light to go and to learn pretty early with, Liz Harvey about a decade ago and Taylor Meacham and Lexi Wright, and now it looks like he's doing that with Molly, where she started as a 7th grader, but now it's the ball's in her hands. Here, go ahead. We're gonna run a lot of this through you. Shaker Gilderland, interesting. They're 2 programs, kind of in different, kind of in different paragraphs right now. They're in different stages of development and talent level and depth, but 2 teams that are working something new in, right? Shaker's working Malia Jackson in. You got to see that on Friday and Saturday with at the Pep Sand tip-off, which we'll talk about in a little while. But they have that depth of returners, a lot of talent, and now they're working in another very talented new piece in Malia Jackson. And then Gilderland, new coach with Coach Friel, and how he is working on kind of creating a program, creating expectations and standards, and setting a standard. So it was interesting to kind of see those 2 different dynamics at play. AP Shen scrimmage, that was AP Shen. That's just, I think that's kind of self-explanatory. Obviously AP, the personnel is I don't even want to say the personnel is very different because they have depth of returners. It's obvious it's who they lost, and Taylor Houlihan and Tatiana Toon. Your go-to kid for the last few years, and Tot was heart and soul. So your go-to kid and your heart and soul, and that's a tremendous loss to try to replace. But the program is the program. This is the first time AP has obviously won the section 10 years in a row. This is the first time in several years that I look at them and say they don't have a star. Taylor was a star. Amelia Wood was a star. Kelsey Wood was a star. You could even maybe, I think the teams before that were a little bit more balanced, but at least in my time doing this, I think of like Steph Jankovic and Sam Laranjo, where they had the ball in their hands a lot. This is the first team in several years that he doesn't really have a star. It'll probably be decent balance. Somebody else stepping up and kind of being an alpha any given game. Maybe some more games played in the 40s, 50s, whereas they've reached 60s, 70s a decent amount in recent years. Shen got to see them twice with the scrimmages. I like this year's group. I think the only thing that Shen ran into the previous couple of years is I thought they peaked a little early. They played like tremendous lights out in December and killed everybody at the Amsterdam showcase, but it was okay, how much better can you get from here? You guys look great right now. How is it possible for you to get much better from here? This Shen team looks like the sort of team that's going to just get better as the year goes on. They're figuring stuff out. They don't run things quite as crisply right now as past teams have run it in November, which I frankly don't care about. I don't care if you run your stuff crisp in November. They're figuring out their depth pieces, but 3 juniors, 2 freshmen in the starting lineup, a lot of energy. These aren't kids that are going to wear out midway through the season. I look at them and expect them to improve, not just in the next few weeks, but then in January and into February, and probably play some of their best basketball late in the season. What was the other one? Boston Spa, Stillwater. Stillwater's good. Stillwater's legit. I know when I was on here a couple months ago, I brought up Addison Thornton as somebody I thought was one of the most improved kids from year over year, or from year to year in Section 2. She was very good. I was playing against a suburban council team that they're figuring their stuff out with Sophia Lee having gone prep, but they still have, Boston Spa still has like 5 actual basketball players in the starting lineup. And, I thought Addison was tremendous. She's developed a sort of skill set, a sort of game that translates outside of small school, outside of Wazarn League, outside of all that. Just the skill level, ability to change speeds in between game. Like if she's playing, Boston Spa, they've got some, a little bit of size in the front court, but they don't have like 6-foot+ athletes. But her sort of game, she showed just in there, it's a sort of game that kind of translates if she was to play against those type of kids. Just the ability to get 2 feet in the paint, floater in between game. Not everything is just all the way to the rim all the time, like you see with so many kids. And they've got depth. Like Miranda Price, scorer that's going to Sage next year. Maddie Chat, who's a freshman, played very well for him in the scrimmage. That's Stillwater Greenwich in the Wazarn and in Class C. Looking past that, that's a fun little matchup shaping up to be, and they get to see each other in a couple weeks.
We'll touch on the Pepsi and Tip-Off Classic that you teased. We'll get to that in a second. But let's just kind of wrap up all the scrimmage talk quick, because I know you went out on Saturday to Canandaigua to an event that was a little hampered by the snow in Western New York to a degree, and then you were back at Shen on Sunday as well. So just talk a little bit about the experiences you had there and what you took away from those visits.
The Super Scrimmage out in Canandaigua, it's the 3rd year that they've had it. It was put on by Matt Oswalt, who I know you've developed a little bit of familiarity with through your work with the network and with CAP this year. It's something that Matt Oswalt put together a couple of years ago, and Mike Brennan, the coach of Canandaigua, has done a great job with kind of, some of like the game day ops, so to speak. That's an annual, as long as it's looking like it has been, that's an annual trip for me. 3rd year of it this year. It would have been 20 teams if everybody was able to make it because of the weather, but 3 of the Buffalo area teams backed out. Lancaster backed out, Williamsville South backed out, which was unfortunate. Really wanted to get a look at them, and West Seneca West in the Buffalo South towns. But so it ended up being 17 teams primarily Section 5, Section 6, and Monsignor Martin, the publics and privates split in Section 6. So the Catholic schools play in Monsignor Martin division, which is in the CHSAA. So they play in playoffs with the New York City Catholics. And then a little bit of Section 3 and Section 4 as well. Some, Jamesville, DeWitt, West Genesee, Horseheads, Susquehanna Valley. So that was, you catch 17 teams that they're all competitive teams. They're all highly competitive within their within their environments. They all have probably, future college basketball players, obviously, definitely college athletes, but pretty much all of them future college basketball players at all levels. It's a worthwhile, especially for me, it's a worthwhile trip. Just 3-hour easy shot on the thruway. What caught my eye for anyone that would be listening to this that pays attention to out of area? My biggest takeaway was maybe, and this ties back in slightly, a little bit roundabout way to the pep sand. North Tonawanda was maybe the most interesting or most eye-catching team that I saw, at least from my thoughts going into my thoughts leaving. NT has a return transfer that was one of the stars at Cardinal O'Hara in Annabelle Day. She was NT in middle school. She went to O'Hara for the previous 2 years. She's back at North Tonawanda. 5'11" wing athlete, shooter, Division I kid, Division I offered kid. She's rejoining her younger sister Lily, who's a freshman that has stayed at NT through this. They're both D1 offered kids. They've got a big kid in the middle, 6'2", that might be a D1 volleyball kid, but could be a scholarship basketball player too. And how those, and they have a little bit of depth around them too. So that's a team in North Tonawanda where you have 2 legitimate Division I basketball players, a third that's definitely a D1 athlete that could be a scholarship player, and then some, a little bit of depth of players and definitely depth of athletes around them. That was that was kind of an eye catcher as far as, their performance there. The way the schedule had to be shifted last minute because of the backouts. What we did get to see, which wasn't on the schedule initially, was North Tonawanda scrimmaging against Bishop Kearney, which that was probably the matchup of the day, where we had multiple D1 kids on both sides of the ball and contrasting styles, different styles of play. So that was an entertaining watch. But yeah, it was a good opportunity to see a lot of teams, big schools, smaller schools like Union Springs. A lot of, again, college players, future college players, various levels. Decent amount of coaches there. That was also probably impacted by the weather, because that's something that will generally attract like every college coach from the I-81 corridor west. And there were some faces that you would expect to see that weren't there. Probably same reason why Lancaster, Will South, and West Seneca West weren't there. But still decent amount of coaches there. They do a good job with it. So always worth the trip. And then, Shen Penfield that Sunday. That's like an annual sort of thing. Coach Vogt and Penfield, they always love to come out, or seem to love to come out here and get scrimmages in, or come to the Battle of New York that Joe Murphy puts on in August every year. Sometimes they come out here, get a couple non-league games in. I think they're in Amsterdam this year. So this is kind of a different team for Coach Vogt, because Penfield is a recognized and respected program that always tends to have basketball players. They don't really have basketball. I mean, they have kids that play basketball, but they don't have like basketball first kids on this team. It's a lot of lacrosse kids, a lot of volleyball kids. So he's got great athlete depth, but not kids that are hoopers. So they're, that's it's basketball. So if you have a basketball team without basketball first kids, it can be a challenge. But he is a very high level coach. They do have strong depth of athletes. So that's another sort of team that you expect to see them in, look considerably better January, February, as those kids that aren't basketball first kids now have a ball in their hands 5-6 days a week for months at a time. You just expect those kids to be better, be more crisp, make shots. But it's always good to see them out here.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Penfield, just as a little bit of a teaser for anybody who's looking for post-Christmas plans that weekend right after Christmas. The Friday the 27th through the 29th is the Amsterdam Holiday College Showcase. Penfield, you mentioned one of those teams. They'll be facing Bethlehem that Friday the 27th, and then Kingston Saturday the 28th. So if you want to check them out, if Jeff has, piqued your interest about Penfield, that's when you can go and check them out at the Amsterdam Showcase. All right, let's get into the Pepsi and Tip-Off Classic. We mentioned it a couple of times in passing. Let's just dive into it now. Two pairs of varsity girls matchups between Black Friday and then Saturday the 30th of November. Day one, we saw Catholic High be able to hold off Shaker, and then Colony hold off Cardinal O'Hara. And then Saturday, we saw Shaker get the victory. So they came away 1-1 from the weekend, beating Cardinal O'Hara. And then Colony, led by a stellar second half by Ella Tremarchi, being able to take care of Catholic Central. So Colony walks away from that 2-0. Shaker and Catholic High, respectively, 1-1. Real quick, though, before we get into the three Section 2 teams that were in that, Cardinal O'Hara, they were being led by a St. John's commit, Kyla Hayes, senior, probably in the 6'1", 6'2" range. They didn't give heights for their older players, so I'm just kind of guessing. But kind of the kind of player that has a well-developed post game, but also isn't afraid to be a stretch big and go and it has a very good 3-point shot as well. Definitely was impressed by Kyla, but not just Kyla though, as both Colony and Colony and Shaker found out. They also have some good athletes there that can both drive the ball as well as shoot the three. So definitely was interesting to see Cardinal O'Hara and what they're made of and what they could provide for the Catholic High School Association.
Yeah, so O'Hara is, I was, with all due respect to our three locals, I was more intrigued watching O'Hara going into it than anyone else, because for myself and then for anybody that's out in Western New York, that's one of the main things going into the season is, how does O'Hara look? How do they adjust? Because they lost a lot. They graduated kid Jordan Williams, really high level wing athlete that plays at Niagara. They graduated a strong, solid combo guard and Olivia Valone Russell that's playing at Duville with Ava Pearson. Just had a ECC Rookie of the Week honors, I think, last week. And graduated the oldest day sister, Brittany, who's running track at Niagara this year, so another high-level athlete. They lost Annabelle to transfer. They lost Annabelle Day to North Tonawanda. We just broached that subject. There were a couple other kids that maybe they would have expected to get via transfer. Lily Day, and maybe a couple others that didn't pan out. And to anybody listening around here that maybe might not understand how the rules work out there, This is why when everybody out here says, "Oh, we should split the publics and privates. The privates shouldn't play in the playoffs." I don't know if you really want that, because that's what happens in Buffalo with the Monsignor Martin and the CHSAA. But with the CHSAA rules, you can transfer and play right away. You wouldn't have to sit a year. So that's, that's always a thing with Western New York, with the Buffalo area schools. You can transfer from your public school to O'Hara or St. Mary's in Lancaster or Nichols or Sacred Heart, and you don't have to live in that district. You can play, you transfer, and you can play right away. So that's a, whenever I hear that from around here or anybody else, Syracuse or Utica or wherever, that we should split. I'm like, are you sure you want to split? Because that could open up an entire different can of worms that you weren't prepared for. But anyways, back to the subject. Losing that amount of talent to graduation and then losing another big piece via transfer, and maybe not getting one or two kids that you would have expected to get. That's kind of the thought for O'Hara. Like, what are they going to look like? How much are they going to be able to produce around Kyla? They have pieces. Alana McGriff, I like her. Naima Blair, little point guard, I like her. And they're returners from last year. But, that was going in. It's okay. Will they have consistent production around Kyla? Will there be times that Kyla's on an island? What's the how will that shape up? First off, if Kyla continues to score 40 points on like 22 shot attempts, like she did against Colony, they're going to be okay. That was my that was my thought from that game. Colony was the better team, and I've said that, and this all due respect to O'Hara, but people asked me how that went when I was out in Canandaigua Saturday, and I said, if Colony and O'Hara play each other 100 times, Colony might win that 100 times, because just I think it's a bad matchup for O'Hara, and I think Colony's depth of talent is far too much for them to overcome, and their talent at the top is high level talent, as you got to see with Tremarky's Saturday outburst, and so on and so forth. You've seen it time and time again. But yeah, if Kyla scores 40 on 17 for 22 from the field, man, they're gonna be okay. Like, they'll be just fine. I didn't see I didn't see Saturday's game, so I don't know how that went over the course of the entirety. I know that it was moderately competitive with Shaker, right? 8-point game, maybe down double digits, came back late. But yeah, O'Hara is still, between Kyla's a difficult matchup for everybody because of her. She's developed and she's come such a long way from when she was a younger kid, being more of like a big body bully back to basket forward, to still, adding the skill piece and the finesse and the footwork and the ability to stretch to the arc and the ability to play off the bounce while not losing the strength, not just becoming a finesse player, still having that sort of superior physicality and strength. She's a tough matchup for everybody. But seeing, there were some flashes on Friday of Alana McGriff, like, okay, this is a better Alana than in the past. This is somebody that could be due for a breakout junior year. And then a couple of the depth guards that they brought, Michaela Biles, who was her first game at O'Hara, so Friday was a little bit more of a struggle for her. I expect her to come around and be very valuable for them as the season goes on. 5'8", dribble drive, slithery guard. And a couple of their other younger depth guards that they brought in. I think they brought one in from Buffalo City Public Schools, and got a kid that started for him, Samaya Walker from Park, that I think will help them. They should still be in good shape in the Catholics.
All right, so let's jump into the three local teams that were a part of that. First thing being Class AAA sectional finalist Shaker. Pretty much bring back just about the entire squad from 23-24. Obviously, they still have the Lonnie twins, Peyton Hoblock, Jayla Jeter. Now they add in Malia Jackson, who transferred in over the course of the summer and is now at Shaker. They have Jace Cavill now as a freshman that comes in off the bench. Mahalo Roots off the bench as well. Ale Powell impressed me, especially as a defensive presence over the course of the weekend. Obviously, I think the one thing I took away from it, and you can tell me how you saw things since you were there Friday night yourself, is that it's going to be a little bit of growing pains, I feel like, in a way for Shaker because of the fact that they've been so guard reliant over the last couple of years, even going back to when Lexi Carrington was there up until she graduated this past spring. That they've usually been a pretty guard reliant squad, and now they have somebody who can provide a regular post presence in Malia Jackson. So now it's a matter of finding that balance and being able to rely on that post presence regularly whenever they want to. Because Malia, she may only be a sophomore, but she, even just in the 2 games this past weekend, and I even go back to when I saw her at your showcase almost 2 months ago, she can be a dominant force. And it's just a matter of really Shaker figuring things out about how to balance the tremendous guard play they have, and when they do get out in transition and use their athleticism, and then also being able to use Malia effectively in the post when needed.
Their puzzle pieces are Ferraris and Porsches and Lexus and BMWs. It's just a matter of making those puzzle pieces fit, which takes time. It doesn't matter. You can do as much as you want with open gyms and practices and whatever. It just takes time. It takes real game reps to get that straight, which that'll come. Like the pieces of their puzzle are brighter and shinier and worth more money at the auction than a lot of other people's pieces to the puzzle. They'll be fine. That's one. They'll be fine. It's just it's balancing. You have like Giada and Sophia Lanny. They're great transition players. Malia Jackson is more effective in a half-court basketball game, and like those. I'm not just singling out those 3, but those are just prime examples, easy ones to start with, and it's balancing. You do have some players that maybe perform better in different styles of games, which is a good thing down the again, if you make these pieces fit, it's a good thing, because this looks like the sort of team that could win different styles of games. You could win a game 68-62. You could also win a game 46-43 in a rock fight. So, it's a good. I don't know if I even want to call it a problem, right? It's a good thing to have to try to work through, but it's also something you try to figure out how to achieve the balance between, we want to get up and go, but we also want to pound the bejesus out of the paint, and we want to wear on them and wear them down over the course of 32 minutes. So, yeah, I mean, there's growth to happen over the course of the winter, but they're good. They're good. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, completely agreed. And I wasn't, some people might think that the way I was coming off was kind of gloom and doom. Trust me, it's not gloom and doom at all when you've got those pieces in particular that we named.
if they didn't have you said they had they had maybe some growing pains and growth to do. I mean, if you don't have growing pains over the course of winter, then you're not doing it right.
Exactly. And and like I mentioned, they also have some really good young pieces that were contributing in ways off the bench. And as they get minutes, they'll also become bigger pieces of the puzzle as well, and be able to showcase all their talents. And that will just help take off the load even more from the Lonnies and Hoblock and Malia, so that, if you can get yourself that kind of well-rounded rotation of 8-9 deep that you can go to night in and night out and not have to fear any kind of massive drop-off, that'll pay off eventually come, those knockdown drag-out suburban council games, and then obviously into sectionals. So obviously that's a good, like you said, good problem to have, right?
Yeah, and I have to mention this because I didn't get the time to write about Friday, and I won't get the time to write about it, or else I would have mentioned this. Speaking of the young kids, this was one of my thoughts after or even during their game against Catholic High Friday. If you just showed me Ale Powell's stat line Friday, which was probably like played 6 minutes, didn't score, and fouled out. Right? Like if you just say that sounds like what a difference she made coming in the second half. Like, yes, she played in the context of a 32-minute game, limited minutes, got in early foul trouble, ended up fouling out. But I thought when Coach Shipley put her in the early in the third quarter, I thought she was one of the catalysts of them changing their energy. Catholic High was the aggressor in the first half. Shaker matched the vibe in the third. I think it was what I used on social media. That's and a lot to do with that was they as a team, they started to gain energy as Ale picked Dior Dobert up full court, and whether she won the battle or lost, whether she got blown by or she got a tip or she got called for a foul or she busted through a screen or whatever it was, her energy, I thought, really kind of changed that team's temperature in the third quarter, which led them on that little run to go from down double digits to even taking the lead at the end of the third.
So use a phrase you're probably used to hearing in weather reports. She was a high energy disturbance, as I'll put it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. You need that. Like that's you need, if you can have a microwave scorer and as you said, high energy disturbance coming off your bench. Like if you have those two pieces coming off your bench, that's a complete team. And
now
that with her, or they got the high energy disturbance with her on Friday.
Right. Now to shift over to the other Section 2 team that went 1-1 over the weekend at the Pep San tip-off. Catholic Central won the states in Class A last year, now getting bumped up to AA. Really a really good showing from them in both games, I would say. But there's two specific things I want to address with this Catholic High team. As again, another squad like Shaker that, and this the same thing for Colony as well. So a theme for all three teams really here. Pretty much all the significant parts from their run last year coming back this year. But two specific things I wanted to mention with Catholic High. Number one, obviously, a lot of the glory and the shine goes to Turpin, Dobert, and Foglia. But really, I have to say that since late last season into sectionals and beyond, and it happened to me again with her on Friday and Saturday nights, Akari Gatti just continues to grow and grow and grow and become a bigger force that really, I think, is pretty much at a point now where you can consider giving her equal attention and love as those other three. Not to diminish the other three, but I just feel like Gatti's that much of a disturbance at this point as an all-around player and not just a defensive presence. She's really improved her offensive game, has a really good touch around the basket, can shoot free throws. She's really put the pieces together, I feel like, going through that end of season run last year and now to start this season. And then secondly, we have to touch on it. The fact that Ella DeBacco, unfortunately, she suffered an injury at the end of soccer season in the fall, and is going to be having surgery and will be missing this basketball season. So obviously her presence will be missed on the court, between the lines. Obviously she'll be as much of a cheerleader and basically a third assistant coach as possible on the bench, but clearly a loss with not having Ella there. Just talk about those two factors specifically, if you don't mind, Akari and then the loss of Ella.
Yeah, and in certain ways, they almost tie the two of them in. It's unfortunate, obviously, that Ella went down. We won't miss her energy because her energy is just going to stay there. But we'll miss seeing her on the court, kind of completing that lineup, completing that unit this year, and hope for a speedy but full recovery. She's somebody that plays on the basketball court. She plays a relentless, assertive, aggressive, physical, always willing to mix it up sort of style. So, that's when, and she's the sort of kid that up here, mentally, I don't think that ever turns off. I don't think that any kind of injury or whatever turned that off from her. So, I hope for a full recovery, get her back out there doing what she does. But yeah, they have other guards. They slide Mia Rodriguez into that starting spot. They had some depth of guards, so there's somebody that they can plug into that spot, but it is a different player. So it does it alters what they do a little bit offensively, because Ella was a little bit more reliable of a floor spacer shooter, where Mia is more of a dribble drive kid. So how does that change the team? You're not necessarily replacing with a floor spacer. You're replacing, now Dior can shoot the ball a little bit, especially coming off of ball screens. Somebody slides behind the screen because she's quick and they're playing the drive. She's good at just sliding behind the ball screen and stepping in and knocking down perimeter jumpers. Chris Foglia can shoot the ball, hit some big ones against Shaker. But this turns into a team that their offensive identity might be even a little bit more of like assault on the rim. And when I watched them Friday, that was a lot, against Shaker that was playing man the whole time. That was a lot of assault on the rim, dribble drive, early clock, mid clock, late clock, trying to get paint touches, whether it was with Dior, Navi Turpin catching the ball at the top and just clearing some space for her. Mia Rodriguez attacking closeouts. That that means even more responsibility for Akari. Akari Gatti is totally a rim player offensively. It can be back to the basket. It can be face up. It can be catch and finish, but she is a rim player. She is to the rim, at the rim. So, that makes it, if they're going to be even more of a dribble drive team, her presence, even just being mobile, moving block to block, catching and finishing, becomes infinitely more valuable. And she's an X factor for that group. If she's a presence, if she's involved, if she's engaged, she can give you double-digit points. She can do it, even if it's all at the rim, it can be in a variety of ways. It can be some catch and finish. It can be some offensive rebound, and it can be some dump it to her in the block, and she gives you something off a post move. But she's also got the, end-to-end mobility. She can slide up and move her feet, if she has to against somebody that's not a true forward. She's got that sort of that athleticism, and they really, maybe more so than anything, they need her presence. They need her on the court. So, whatever she gives them, she stays out of foul trouble. They need her on the court, because that frees stuff up for Navi, and then Navi frees stuff up for her. It's a private school that's an unholy tandem. And they got them both when both are functioning.
All right, and then we go to the host of the tip-off tournament that came away with a pair of victories over the weekend. The defending Class AAA champions out of Section 2, Colony. It's one of those things where, if you watch them enough last season, you pretty much knew what you were getting from all the returning pieces that are in that starting five. You knew you were getting from Hoffman, Pearson, Tremarky. Allie Payne was in and out of the starting lineup because of various injuries last season on the squad. So, if you saw Allie once, you knew what you were getting from her. Caden Cornell now in the starting rotation as a senior. And then some quality minutes from senior Sydney Pleat. And then a pair of sophomores coming off the bench as well, and Maddie Klaus and Gianna Lake. Really, one of those things where, if they can establish their pace that they like to go at, they're going to be tough to beat. It's Cody. Like if you saw the program last year, it's pretty much same song, second verse at this point with them, because they very much brought everyone back. The only real pieces, they lost Kendall Abraham, they lost Gabrielle Martin, they lost Grace Mary Bauman. But I mean, you had the post presence right behind Grace Mary and Allie. You have, a bunch of guards that are coming right in that can take over and fill the roles that Gabrielle and Kendall leave behind. So, it's just a little bit of a reload for County, but at the same time, a lot of that same production is still back.
Yeah, they graduated a couple pieces, but they didn't graduate their identity. Their identity is the same. They play an aesthetically pleasing brand of basketball. That's an enjoyable group to watch. Just the depth of talent, the floor spacing, the IQ and the feel for the game. The fluidity of those kids. And yes, part of it can be the fact that they've played together for a long time, but you can have kids that played together I see kids that play together for a long time all the time that stink with each other. They're part of that is the individual feel and IQ for the game that those kids bring to the team. It's fun to watch them. And yes, they're not big, we're just talking about Shaker. Like Shaker's a big team. This team isn't big like that, but they're 5'9", 5'10", pretty much across the board outside of Aaliyah. And they've got some length in someone like Liv Hoffman, and they've got the toughness, kind of the brute physicality piece that Allie Payne brings them. Ella's kind of a little bit of both. Not brute physicality, but she got some strength. She'll mix it up. She's got, just her fluidity and feel for the game. It feels like she covers a lot of ground for somebody her size at 5'9"-ish. But that's just it's a fluid team. They're just fun to watch. And yeah, the watching them against O'Hara, their ability to space the floor, knock down shots, make the extra pass, the ball doesn't stick. And it wasn't one or two kids making shots, where maybe I wasn't there Saturday. It might have been that, or where Ella had 4,000 points or however many it was. 36? That was I was in Canandaigua, but I turned on the huddle stream for it was the end of the third quarter and the fourth quarter of that one after the scrimmage ended, and then saw. I don't know. I didn't know that Ella ended up with 36, but I probably saw her score about 15 just in 10 minutes. But, Friday it was Aaliyah hits a couple shots. Liv doesn't play a whole lot. Liv Hoffman doesn't play a whole lot in the first half because of some, picking up a couple fouls, but bring in Sydney Pleat, who makes a couple shots. Gianna Lake hits a couple shots. Liv comes back in the second half, has 14 in the half. Ella Tremarky hits a couple shots. Allie Payne hits a shot, a couple shots. Like it was a lot of jump shots made from, off the hands of like 8 different kids, which, if that's the case, good luck. Good luck defending that. Can't zone them. You play like that, you can't zone them. They move so well. If you match up against them, they move so well. Ella moves so well. Liv Hoffman moves well. So that's they're good. I mean, they're good. They're fun to watch. Like that's a team that if I had somebody, if I had somebody that wanted to start paying attention to women's basketball, and they're like, who are the teams from around here? Probably the first one right now that I would want them to watch is Colony, just because if you're a new fan and you watch that Colony team, you're going to want to watch more. That's like a soda sort of team. The first time you drink soda, or that pop and that fizz, the sugar, the flavor, and you're like, ooh, I want more of that. Whereas beer is an acquired taste, and how many people drank beer for the first time and liked it. But then by the time, your 6th, 7th, 8th time, you start to develop favorites, you develop a taste for it. But Colony is like a soda team. You watch them, they're fun to watch.
Colony is a soda team. I'm going to keep that in my back pocket, I think, at some point. So we'll come back around to that, I think. All right. To wrap up this, we're just going to dive into each of the 6 classes quick, some a little quicker than others, and just kind of give our preseason thoughts as things are really going to kick into high gear over the course of this week. We'll just kind of we'll start with the smaller schools and work our way up to AAA. So starting in Class D, obviously Northville, they're returning, I believe, all but one graduating senior they had from last year's squad. They went all the way to the state finals in Class D before running into a buzzsaw in Hammond Central, who won their 2nd straight state title in Class D back in March. I hate to make it as simple as this, but especially given there's only 7 total schools competing in Class D, is there anything that could really stop Northville aside from catastrophe from an injury standpoint from repeating and representing Class D into the state tournament?
Anything can happen any given day. So especially with, I always say, go ahead and bet on high school girls basketball if you want to lose all your money. You never really know. It's Northville versus the field. And if you were a betting person, you would put it on Northville. Return basically everybody. You got the best player in the section in that class, in Haley Monroe, one of the best players in the state in Class D. Pieces around her that fit. So even though they're kind of a smaller, 5, 6 and under sort of team, pieces around her that fit. I think with her high school, she does a good job of, my take on them last year which with the amount of returning pieces and with Coach Zulo on the sidelines, I mean, that's I would expect this to continue. I thought they did a tremendous job of players being productive and effective within their roles, while at the same time understanding that there was a hierarchy, which is so difficult to be able to achieve that balance in high school. I mean, basketball at any level, really, but high school basketball, it's so difficult for that to get that kind of buy-in and effectiveness. And I thought that was key for them, that they had the Kira Mackey and I'm blanking on names, Lily Klippel and Flickinger. Like they had other players that were productive and they were strong within their roles, but everybody kind of understood there was a hierarchy involved on that team. And I would expect to see that again this year. It's Northville versus the Field. Wasn't exactly great competition, but they had 2 blowout wins to start the week over the weekend at their own tournament. They beat Watervliet by about 30. They beat Salem by a bunch. The other 2 that maybe I would expect to see on the other side, kind of duking it out for the chance to play them at Hudson Valley, would be Hartford and Spa Catholic. Hartford's always around with Coach Johnson, returning backcourt, his daughter Mackenzie Johnson, who's a junior, and Kaylin Severance, who's a senior. They should be there on the other side, and Spa Catholic has another, their own kind of dominant guard talent in Sophia Ryan, who's just a sophomore. They play in the Wazern League, so they get whooped around a bit during the season. They play Greenwich, Stillwater, Mechanicville, those sorts of schools. But then you play that all year, and then you go to Class D playoffs. You've had 3 months of playing at a different speed. So I think they pushed Northville for a half last year. I think they may have played in the semifinals last year. I think they pushed Northville for a half, and then the second half was all Northville. But yeah, those would be the other 2 that I would expect to see on the other side. They actually play each other in a non-league game this week on Wednesday that I haven't made my schedule for the back end of this week. I've covered the first half of this week. I haven't made my decisions yet. I may actually go up to Hartford for that, but they play Hartford and Spa Catholic play each other Wednesday, which I'm kind of interested in seeing how that plays out. But yeah, Northville versus the Field, indeed.
Yeah, and just to add on quick to Northville before I move on. One, I'm very interested to see how Izzy Cologne, I believe she's a sophomore this year, and as a freshman last season, she was eventually working away from the bench, and I think she was even injured early in the part of the season. But she worked her way into a consistent part of that rotation by the time they got into sectionals and states. I think even had a couple of starts in that postseason run. So very interested to see how she continues to develop in that program. And then secondly, this may be nothing, but I'll put it out there. A good chunk of these girls are coming off of winning a state title in the fall season as part of the soccer team. Mm-hmm. So between the motivation of, feeling that loss in the finals last March, and then being able to fast forward 7-8 months later, and I'm not going to call it redemption per se, but get the feeling of the other side of it by winning a state title in soccer. Maybe that does something to the mental that, helps them say, okay, we've been there in 2 different ways. Now let's try to feel it the way we felt it in soccer, and let's try to spin that on the hardwood. Just a little food for thought, honestly, I think.
The longer that I've done this, the more I think that matters for the small schools. I don't think it matters so much for large schools, AAA, AA, even A, just because you have more specialized athletes, and it's just kind of a higher level of play where you're talking more teams that have more kids that focus on a specific sport. But in the C's and D's, when you have that, where I know we're about to talk about the C's, which has another example of this, but with when you're talking about those sorts of schools and you're retaining so many of your athletes from one sport to the next, that winning experience I do think matters and translates. And that's you have a group that's coming off of that made it to a state championship and lost in basketball last year, won a state championship in soccer just a couple weeks ago. Yeah, that's a good point. I do think that carries over, especially when you're talking C's and D's.
Speaking of Class C, we switch over to that now, and I've been. I don't know if it's unfair to me to provide this narrative, but it's a narrative that I basically created on this show over the last number of weeks. In that, I kind of feel like, and I could be wrong, but I think there might be a little public perception right now that it's a little like Class D, where people are basically saying, "Okay, it's Greenwich and then the field." And as talented as Greenwich is with Kuzmic and Autiello, and then bringing in the Wolf sisters from South Glens Falls, I get that. I do. But I feel like that's undermining a few of the schools that are going to be competing in Class C. Like, I know you mentioned Stillwater earlier on when you were talking about your scrimmage, the scrimmages that you went to. Maple Hill with Addie Lazinski. We just had her and Coach Oliver on the last episode of this program. There's even though they have lost Allison O'Hanlon and Hannah Mulhern and Alex Moses from last year's state finals team, Dwaynesburg, Chris Herron, he gets those girls to buy in, and I wouldn't totally discount. I'm not saying they're going to go, and do the same thing they did last year or even the 2 or 3 years prior, but it's still Dwaynesburg. I mean, do you agree with me on that, or do you feel like it's basically the same thing as Class D, where it's one school and then the rest of the field?
I'm looking at 4 teams in C. I'm looking at Greenwich, Stillwater, Burn Knox, Westerlo, and Maple Hill. Those are the 4 that I think, if we're talking preseason paper and what my expectations would be, those are the 4 that I look at and really kind of put, maybe in a separate paragraph. Greenwich, yes, you pick up, Greenwich. Would I call Greenwich a favorite? Yeah. Do I think it's a runaway? No, I just watched Stillwater on Wednesday. They're good, and they were missing a kid that'll be back. She was on vacation for Thanksgiving. They were missing a front court depth piece. They're good, and then even if you think about those 2 specifically, that's a league game. They're 15 minutes away from each other. They play each other twice in the regular season. If they happen to line up against each other in the playoffs, which I think is a solid likelihood, that'll be a 3rd time. That's what I call Greenwich a favorite. I mean, Brooke Kuzmic, Grace Audiello, Bailey Wolf, Jordan Wolf, Olivia Davis, and Riley Brophy as your top 6. Yeah, that's a strong group. And bringing the Wolves in, not only is it that you bring in talent, it's you bring in what that team needed. They had little guards, good guards. Brooke is obviously Brooke is one of the better point guards in Section 2, regardless of class. But you brought in you have like the 5, 6 and under club in the backcourt, and then dribble, drive, catch and finish around the rim forwards. You didn't have your wing length. You didn't have floor spacing that can shoot over contests so much in February and March, against your higher level athletes. But Bailey and Jordan are 5'9". Bailey can serve as a secondary ball handler. They like to play dribble drive offense against man. She serves as a secondary ball handler, finishes athletic, finishes at the rim, and she can shoot. Jordan, more in that vein, more specifically a floor spacer, but knockdown shooter. You can play pick and pop with her, and she'll mix it up a little bit more around the rim. Like she's kind of a plug and play piece where she can give them minutes at the wing and she can give them minutes at the 4. There's a lot of postseason experience with, late season experience with them. They've been to Hudson Valley the last 3 years, and it's kids that have kept the basketball in their hands throughout the spring, summer. There isn't an off season, spring, summer, fall months, and they've improved. So, they are one of the top teams in the state in Class C. They should be one of the top teams in the state in Class C. Stillwater should also be one of the top teams in the state in Class C. With the group that with the amount, I know I already talked about it at length earlier, but the development of Addie Thornton, Miranda Price is somebody at the wing, another athlete at the wing that'll give you any given day. She can give you 25. Maddie Chat, who started last year as an 8th grader, and she's also, and that's a plug and play kid for Stillwater as well, where she's 5'8" plus with length, and she's a high level athlete. She can mix it up around the rim, but she can blow by people at the arc. She hit probably 5 threes in that scrimmage against Boston Spa. She might be their most effective individual defender. That's the sort of kid that, and it looks like Coach Chapko is going to play. She played man a lot in that scrimmage. And, that's somebody that has the athleticism that can guard high-level players. And they have athleticism in the front line. Andy Luskin and Anna Perella, who was the one that was missing. But, you have Andy's a multi-sport kid. Like, I think that she might be 50-50 on the basketball-volleyball thing. But Perella's more of a volleyball kid. You have a front line of volleyball athletes, which is helpful to Class C in the Class C ranks. They're a very good team. But then even beyond that, I like the way Bern looks, and that's one that I would bring up almost in the same vein as Northville. That's a lot of multi-sport athletes that won a state championship in softball in the spring. So there's winning experience there. There's a very experienced coach that I think that this Bern team fits Coach Galvin. I think they fit his style. They fit his principles. They fit, the way that he wants to coach. I was they're a long way from what their end game sort of goal is, just because they are multi-sport athletes, and you could tell the November basketball piece of them watching them scrimmage. But they return a lot of kids. They have different, they have guards that fill different voids. Like I mentioned, Shaver, they're going to put the ball in her hands a lot, but Bella DeGulio, another guard that I think started for him last year as a shooter. Mm-hmm. Cady Stevens, a wing, who's a high-level athlete. Who's like state-level competitive in track or indoor track, or Annie Landrum, who's probably among the C's, one of the strongest physical presences. So Bern's going to be a tough out. And Maple Hill, you got, El Skippo, Addie Lazinski. And, Addie Lazinski's Addie Lazinski's as good of a pure athlete as anybody that we just talked about in that field. And she could put a team on her back any given day. Sydney Rogers, right? They return their top 3 from Maple Hill returns their top 3 from last year. With Rogers as a knockdown shooter, Rosalie Forrest, who's kind of an X factor for them, intriguing player, 5'11", really long, wiry, kind of weeping willow tree qualities with the arms, but skilled. Jump hooks, back to the basket, can step out and shoot the 3, can run the floor, block shots. I think you have if you were to list all of the top teams in the state in Class C, I think I think Section 2 has 2 of the top 5 and 4 of probably the top 15.
That's
So,
a fair assessment. Yeah. Yeah. Just to put a pin in Class A real quick. You know,
what class? Where are we? We're going up to B.
what's up?
What? I didn't hear you. We're going to B.
Yeah, just to put a pin in Class C quick, I'm just gonna kind of bring back the general principle that you brought up in that the quote unquote never gamble on girls basketball thing. Um, you know, Greenwich is kind of an example of that, which is why I don't uh I don't just say Greenwich and then the field, because 2 years ago they played pretty seamless basketball in all their games of Hudson Valley leading up to the state title game. Whereas last year, uh, I don't know if they had lids on the baskets for them during that Class C title game against Waynesburg last year, but none of their shots seemed to want to fall at all. And that was when they still had Nana Rojas on the squad before she went to Cobleskill this year. So again, just you know, you can always have a freak game where shots just don't fall at all, no matter whether you dribble drive or you're shooting from 30 feet out. And that was just the case in that Class C title game last year for Greenwich. So again, it's just one of those things where, you know, especially now that you look at,
Any given day.
Yeah, any given day. Speaking of any given day, that's kind of how I label Class B because uh I know Mechanicville, they made the Class B sectional finals last year against Academy, who is now moving up to Class A. So we'll touch on them in a moment. But all in all, I feel like Class B is absurdly wide open in my eyes. Obviously I just mentioned Mechanicville, but I mean, if all the pieces are flowing right, I would kind of throw Catskill into that. Hoosick Falls and Voorheesville both have new coaches. Hoosick Falls has Mike Long Jr. Voorheesville is getting Terrence Florence from Havoc. Greenville's going to be interesting because even though they have a new coach in Bobby Shields, they do have some good returning young talent on the squad. It's Class B is really the most confusing classification, I feel like, out of the six right now in Section 2. Do you feel the same kind of way?
Last year's Class B semifinals had Albany Academy play Stillwater and Mechanicville play Fonda. Only one of those four teams is fielding a basketball team in Class B this year. Just kind of a microcosm of what I feel about B. Academy's up in A. Stillwater dropped to C. I thought they would have been a favorite in B if they didn't drop to C by 2 kids. And Fonda isn't fielding a varsity team this year. So, I do feel like this is kind of a, I don't know, throw your papers in the fireplace and let them burn. Just don't worry about what it looks like on paper. We'll see. There's a wide open quality to this. Mechanicville comes in, I would say, is maybe your most like the safest, you're the known commodity of the group. Although they did graduate. I thought they graduated in a sense, they graduated their identity because they were kind of like I don't mean this in a negative way because how you win games is how you win games. I felt like they were kind of a rock fight team last year. They're not winning these 65-63 sort of shootouts. If they score a lot, it's because your guards stink and they're turning you over a bunch. Besides that, you're going to play games in the 40s, in the mid upper 40s, and it's kind of nip and tuck and a decent amount. They had some guard play with like Ella Zecca, but a lot went through the front court of Lila Christensen and Sophia Tomasi. They all three that I just mentioned have graduated. I think they returned the most depth with Ava Gaspy and Molly D. Sienna and Tanner Eisman, Elle Richardson. But there's also, there's other teams there that have nobody's a standout. Nobody's there. There's a there's several teams in this mix alongside of them that I'm like, oh, they're decent, or they're all right, or they could be good. They got to figure some stuff out. I would look at Kisaki as a team that interests me a little bit out of the Patroon, where they graduated 1,000-point scorer and Riley Sitzer that's now at Sage, but they returned Bailey Brisky, who is she got the highest upside, I think, out of any individual player in Class B, and especially if it's a sort of that it's going to be I think it's a style-based team. Bailey, 5'10", high-level athlete, wants to get up and down the court, wants it to be an open court back and forth game. And they have a player that nobody really talks about that I think has improved a decent amount in the last several months that could be due for a pretty sizable sophomore jump in Reagan Helen. Just kind of a depth piece for him last year. Played, got good minutes, but just a complimentary player. But the way that Bailey likes to play, Reagan fits that. She's 5'8", she's very long, she's bouncy. You put her at the top of a zone, she can get tips. She's got skill with the ball in her hands, creates a little bit off the bounce. She's the sort of kid that I think could see a pretty big sophomore jump. And if she can be somebody that's like a legitimate running mate with Bailey, they get games of style that they want, which is up and down. They could probably get anybody any given day. Corinth has a lot to replace off of one player with Emily Dingman, who was 1,000 point, they think 1,000 point, 1,000 rebound maybe. So, if not, she was. If not, she would have been if she didn't miss time. The first half of her senior year for recovering from ACL. But they graduated her. She had a triple-double in her 6th collegiate game at Castleton, but 11 points, 22 rebounds, 10 assists, something like that. 6th collegiate game. But they've got pieces. If they have somebody in Whitney Cameron who is a junior that's been at the varsity level, and she's had some moments of, like where she's given them real scoring firepower. And she has the skill set and the ability to be I'm sure that her usage and her reps will balloon this year. She has the ability to be a 20 to 25 point per game scorer for them. She's that good. Her mindset isn't so much that. She's not somebody that goes out of her way to hog up all the volume, but she can be a big scorer for them. They have athletes around them. They should get a lot of wins in the Adirondack League. So, I would expect to see them in 3 months be 17-3 or 16-4 or something like that, and a higher seed, which, again, I think Class B, I think just, throw your hands up in the air and see what happens. Tamarack, we'll see what they have around Kayla Bedoin, but it's Kayla's last run. It's Coach Bedoin's last run, and they always compete. They're scrappy. They always play hard, and I think that's one of the toughest places in Section 2 to go in and get a win. So, they'll be competitive in the Wazarin. I'm interested, and this is actually, I don't know when this is going to go live. This game may have probably will already happen by the time it goes live. But tonight, you've mentioned, but we are speaking on Monday, December 2nd, 2024. Tonight, I think it's a light night on the schedule, and I think I'm going to go Zaki, who I just mentioned, plays at Cobleskill. And I think I'm going to go to that one. It's a late night, and I'm curious. Cobleskill also in B. They've moved from the Colonial to the WAC. They took a big loss. Their best returning player by a long shot, Riley France, moved to Florida. So she's enjoying much better weather, but Cobleskill is not enjoying not having Riley. I thought she would have been, she would be one of the best players in this field. But they had some other pieces. They had some other returning pieces around them. They're in the WAC now. They're going to get a lot of wins in the WAC, or they should get a lot of wins in the WAC. I'm a little curious as to what they look like. We have Voorheesville, T-Flow, and Mia Carmody. And they've got some young pieces. They've got some young pieces as well. They're going to play hard. They're going to defend. They're going to space the floor. And I'm curious as to what they look like January, February. LaSalle. LaSalle's a B. A lot of, you mentioned Catskill with Ava Edmond. Like, you could just kind of just go down the list and name a team and throw it up against the wall.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's going to be wild and crazy.
Yeah.
Wild and crazy with 17 schools in there. I mean, like we basically shown, you could probably rattle off at least 10 of those schools and put together at least a halfway decent argument for why you think they could win Class B. It's just that wild. On the Class A side, I kind of feel for Steve Giglio because, you hear that your one Colonial Council rival, Catholic Central, is moving up to Double A. You're like, yes. And then you hear Albany, your other rival, Albany Academy, is moving up from B to A. You're like, darn it. It's like, that's what's going on. Academy moves up from Class B to Class A after winning back-to-back Section 2 titles in Class B and getting to the state Final Four back-to-back years. So Academy and Holy Names, obviously two of the leading schools of contention in Class A. Other than that, Broadham and Perth, they have the Perry twins who just committed to SUNY New Paltz recently. Chalmont, they're going to be a great squad to deal with Ariana Brandon and Gianna Cirilla there. Class A, obviously Academy and Holy Names are there. But a few other schools that I think could provide some gritty contests across the board.
Yeah, the ones that I've listed as far as like my note sheets going into the season are the four that you mentioned plus Glens Falls. I think Glens Falls can muck things up out of the foothills. Coach Gerard always has them play hard. That's always one of the kind of grittiest, hardest playing teams in Section 2. And they return a lot. They graduated pieces, but they were balanced last year, and they return a lot. They've got some guard play. They've got a little bit of size. They've got some toughness. They've got some shooters. Foothills is kind of like Broad Albin, Queensbury. We'll see when Shea Can. We'll talk about Queensbury in a minute. They're in Double A, but I don't know what Shea Canavan's injury situation is. Amsterdam, and then besides that, Glens Falls is going to get a lot of Foothills wins, and I think they'll be around providing a little bit of depth in the A's. But going to the top, Academy. Academy kind of speaks for itself. They graduated Bella Vincent, which Bella Vincent's somebody that you can't replace from with anybody else on the roster. Just she had a level of athleticism that you just can't you can't just make somebody that kind of athlete. There's a leadership piece to that as well. There's been a leadership piece over the last couple of years, that they've with Bella and Sage, just kind of that competitive edge, and Stilly. But so now you have an experienced group coming back. These were the young kids. This was like the young dynamite group that they are now the leaders. Alex Leonard, and Morgan, and Liana, and so on and so forth. Kira Ostavar is a senior. Emily Thornton's a senior. Like all these kids have been around for 3 years at this point. Kind of establishing roles in leadership, on court peer leadership, I think will be, something with this group. But they're one of the most skilled teams in upstate New York, regardless of class. They're always going to put 5 on the court. That they will always have 5 on the court with 0 liabilities. There's not anybody on that team that's going to get actual minutes you put in the game and say, oh, you don't have to worry about her. Don't worry about her. Don't guard it. You have to. Everybody is a threat. Cap is. I feel like Cap. What I'm impressed with his teams a lot is how for skilled teams, like, we can talk about the offensive stuff all we want. They do a good job in their principles defensively. For a team that doesn't have, they've got, your 5'9", 5'10" sort of size, but they don't have like size. And I think they do a good job with all 5 committing to the glass, limiting second chances. Like, that's second chance points, such a huge portion of offense for so many high school girls basketball teams. I think they do a good job with discipline on the glass. So, which that will come in handy leading into, the next team that I bring up. But that's academy, winning ways, a lot of hoopers. They move from B to A. This is still like a March level team in Class A. Now I bring up Broad Albin, who has all that size. They just have all that size on, everybody on the team. The thing that I'm interested about with Broad Albin, if you are a local to that area, you are familiar with this. If you watched them like 3 years ago, you are familiar with this. If you watch them over the last couple of years and you're not from right around there, you might not know. The last couple of years, as they have developed as like a late February, early March level team, they have not been at full strength. They are at full strength now. Jill Sassanella was the piece that they were missing the last couple of years. They have all the size, they have the length, they have the athletic ability. They had a little bit of guard play, which they graduated, and Camille Calderon, but they didn't have that guard that can give them something when the play breaks down, when it gets late in the shot clock, somebody that can handle bigger, stronger athletes pressuring them. Jill was a standout for them, along with Molly Russum in their early high school days when they were freshmen. Blew out. I don't remember if she did her same knee twice or if she did both knees once, but she did a knee during basketball season or early sophomore year, and then came back. She's a big time soccer kid. Came back in time for soccer season the next year. Junior year soccer season, does a knee again. So she missed all. She's played probably 5 basketball games in the last 2 years, but that's somebody who slides right into kind of a lead guard spot for them. And she fits the mold of the rest of them. She's big, she's tall, she's strong, she's physical, 5'8", 5'9". So now you're talking about like a Broad Albin has a lineup that physical tools and measurables, they look like a Northeast 10 team more so than a high school team. You have that size. You have Molly Russum in that 5'11", close to 6 foot long sort of range. You have the Perry twins, Macy and Summer, both 6-footers and both play like they're about 6'6". And they're such defensive game changers. There's not many people that you have to game plan for. You have to game plan for somebody on pretty much every team as far as what they bring on the offensive end. There are very few people that you have to game plan for as what they do defensively. Macy and Summer at the top of an extended 2-3 that Coach Casey Russell likes to run. Those are difficult passes. Like, it's difficult to connect passes against these kids. they're just so long and so active, and you've got guards that are 5'6" and under that are just trying to create passing angles and get the ball outside of the top of the offense against that length. It's difficult. So their Broad Auburn's strength is even though they've graduated a couple pieces, but their strength is they're such a unique team. You can't do anything to prepare again. Like, you can't do anything in practice to prepare for playing against Broad Auburn unless you have your point guards play a zone with like pool noodles in their hands to try and extend their length, and have your wings do the same thing with just like 8 pool noodles for everybody. It's difficult team to prep for. So they're and all those kids had basketball in their hands for the most part. They've continued to improve. They've been, they've got a taste of the neutral site play. And this is kind of the year that they've built through this senior class. This is kind of the year they've been building for. So they're a real threat. Holy Name's going to have a little bit different of a look this year. You lose Sophia Bologna to prep, and then Janiyah Wood, young freshman, was going to slide into that lead guard spot with Soph down in Florida. She's out with a knee injury. She suffered in the summer, so she's out for the year. So they now turn into a team that's probably going to play around their big, Maggie Vollmer, who had a strong freshman year for them last year. And they've got depth of solid guards around them. They're going to need some floor spacing. Now the lead guard becomes Gianna Savoca, the D3 level senior that's been more and more of a presence over the course of her high school career. I could see a kid that hasn't really been, unless you pay attention to basketball 12 months a year and you're kind of on the local AAU scene, maybe not a name that rings bells yet, but this could be potential for a good freshman year from Lizzie Blanche. Lizzie was on the Holy Names JV team last year, or I think like their star on the JV last year, but she's the sort of kid that can come in and help them immediately as a shooter. She's a knockdown shooter, floor spacer, is a guard with good enough size. That's somebody that can feed off of the attention that Maggie's probably going to get in the middle and make defenses pay for overcommitting. So, yeah, Academy, Broad Auburn, Holy Names, Chalmont you mentioned with Ari Brandon, Gianna Cirilla, solid backcourt, and and Glens Falls is going to get their share of wins out of the foothills, and they should create a challenging day for whoever.
All right, we shift over to Class AA. We talked about Catholic Central earlier. No Ella DeBacco, but still pretty much everyone that was on that New York State Championship team from Class A, that now that they move up to AA. We've mentioned in passing Averill Park earlier, who, you mentioned losing Houlihan and Toon, and you basically echo the same sentiments that I had mentioned to somebody talking about Averill Park a few days ago, in that they just feel like a squad that's going to be a little more heavily reliant on defense, if there is such a thing with Averill Park. But they're going to be a little more heavily reliant, I think, on defense and really grinding out wins than usually has been seen in recent years by Averill Park. Burnt Hills, they're young. It's a second year under Kevin Winnie. Second year. So that's a program that's, getting their identity and establishing it with coach. South Glens Falls, unfortunately, they lose the Wolf sisters. What else here? Columbia, they're always a tough team to figure out with Ouimet and Rainville and Landy as far as where they fall into the rank and file of AA. Niskayuna has a few pieces. Bethlehem has, a couple of pieces. Like an interesting class to try and break down with the addition of Catholic Central and then the way things are laid out from the rest of the usual rank and file within AA.
Yeah, I think there's tremendous depth in double, or there's very good depth in AA. It would be tremendous depth if not for the transfer losses to prep. I think Burnt Hills losing Tegan Keene to Huzak and Boston Spa losing Sophia Lee to Storm King. Really, kind of hits both of them in the heart a little bit. As far as we go from, they're still in the discussion as far as the depth, showing the depth of AA and what kind of talent exists in the class in Section 2. But if I name off Catholic High, Averill Park, Columbia, Bethlehem, Niski, Burnt Hills, Queensbury, Boston Spa, all at full strength, and with those pieces still there, I mean that's a monster 8 as far as like upstate New York public schools are considered. And since I'll start with them, like a Burnt Hills. I think I saw their roster maybe last week, and it's a JV age roster because everybody on that team, freshman or sophomore. So it's that literally, they have talent. They've got Tanaya Monfort, they've got Maggie Lesko, so they've got a pesky backcourt with Tanaya really coming into her own as a player, and then Maggie's a D1 level athlete. Emma Larson coming along, who will, I'm sure, be asked to take a much more of a primary sort of role for them in her sophomore year. I just watched Boston Spa. That primary role is probably going to be placed more in the hands of Aubrey Kramer. Without Sophia Lee, they put 5 kids on the court that are basketball players. Their forwards are committed. Mallory Sprisler to Alfred State, Jess Bones to Hartwick. So you got a couple D3 kids in your front line, and you've got potential college players of your 1, 2, and 3 as well. So, but yeah, kind of going to the top, you look at Catholic High, Averill Park. I think this is Averill Park has won 10 in a row between A and AA, and this is probably the greatest challenge that they've had since 2016, maybe, just as far as where they are at and where the other teams are at around them. This is probably the greatest challenge that they've had in quite some time. I kind of talked ad nauseum about Averill Park and what my thoughts were earlier, but yeah, they lose star quality. They lose heart and soul, but they have guard depth, and they have a team that their qualities all kind of fit each other. So they will have a clear identity led on the defensive end, led on toughness, grind you out, play it for 32 minutes, and make it so you never want to see them again. Which is kind of what Catholic High does too, and it's a different way, it's a different style, but the physicality they wear on you. Catholic High's got, even without Ella for the year, Dior Bears, one of the best point guards in Section 2. Navi Turpin might be, she might not be, the one that's getting she might not get all the scholarship offers. She might not get loads of attention, but I think she is as irreplaceable as anybody is to their teams in Section 2. Just that the activity, the two-way impact, the physicality and leadership, the energy that she brings to them. But Yeah, Catholic High, Averill Park, and we talked about them a decent amount already. They're March level teams. Columbia, they have all the pieces. The only thing that they have lacked up to this point is consistency. But now you have kids that, and I think that they would say that as well. But now you have kids that it's their third, fourth year on varsity, depending on who you ask, or depending on who it is, third or fourth year on varsity. This is the year that this particular group has been building for. With your seniors, with Kendall, we met, and Olivia Landy, so Wagner commit, and Ella Hebler, and then Sarah Rainville, who's a junior, has been around for a while. I think Maddie Mara started for him last year. It was a young one, was a freshman. So, they return everybody that mattered, and they've had their moments of, we are one of those teams that you need to be talking about, that you like, don't forget us. And then they've had their moments where they've put up some duds along the way as well. So the only thing that they've missed to this point is consistency, but they've been around the block and they have the talent and they have the pieces. So you look at them like, this should be the year that happens. They have the sort of schedule this year where they're going to get pushed, they're going to get tested. They've kind of went out of their way to get some challenges. So they should see a lot of different styles of teams. They should get pushed a lot over the course of the regular season. They're in it with Bethlehem, another team I'm going to talk about in a second. If you're interested in AA and you want to see the lay of the landscape, a great place to do it is Friday and Saturday this week at Averill Park. You'll miss out on Catholic High because they'll be down in the Bronx this weekend, but Columbia plays Bethlehem and Averill Park plays Niski on Friday night at the tip-off tournament in Averill Park, and then they all link up again on Saturday. But that could be 4 of the top 5 in Section 2 AA, along with Catholic Central, all at the tip-off tournament in AP this week. Bethlehem, they just went out to Syracuse and got their first 2 games in over the weekend, took their lumps against Liverpool, and beat up on Rome Free Academy. They have it's not a rebuild, it's not a reload, it's like a reconfigure for them. They do return a lot of pieces. When I did my notes on them, I think it actually took me to that the word or the term that I wrote down for them is sneaky depth. Maybe I didn't even really think about how many returners or how many basketball players they had coming back until I took attendance, basically. But there's a reconfiguring, because what they did graduate, I've brought up the word identity a few times in this podcast. They graduated their identity with graduating Caroline Davis and Paige Davenport. I thought their identity in general was a team that gets up and down the court, and you have fluid motion offense players. They're not like a fluid motion offense sort of team at this point. You have smaller guards. You're probably going to work around Caitlin Robbins, who's a Bentley commit and probably the most fundamentally sound player in Section 2. You're going to work around her in the front court. So, they've got smaller guards. They've got kind of a tweener in Kelsey Von Weedle. They've got some young kids that are going to work into the fold and a new coach. So there's some reconfiguring to be done over there, but they have pieces. Niski, new coach as well. Now it's the young group's turn to lead. I thought last year, every time I watched them play, I probably watched them play like 5 times. It was just like clockwork. They started slow first quarter, down 8, down 5. only down 2 because the other team didn't score either, but it was like 7-5. And then bring in the young kids off the bench, and it kind of changed the energy of the team. And Sky Linier and Sierra Gonzalez and Natalie Birmingham. Now it's those 3. Gonzalez is a junior, and Sky and Natalie both sophomores. Now it's their, they step into those primary sorts of roles. Sky, big time athlete. Sierra, big time athlete. Natalie, very skilled, kind of stretch forward type, and I think she's improved a lot in this calendar year. They don't have quite the depth, and it's a younger group, in the same vein, almost as like a Burnt Hills as a younger group, but they've got pieces. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking kind of squarely at Catholic High, Averill Park, and then Columbia can get anyone on any given day, but there's depth in the class.
I'm going to wrap up AA by giving someone their flowers and then naming an X factor. The flowers I want to give out is to Navi Turpin. Now, I know people are probably like, why are you going to give a reigning state champion their flowers? I don't think people truly understand the craziness of this young lady. She was hurt late last season and still performed at her elite level as much as possible through the entire postseason run. And she's still been suffering from that injury even up through this past weekend in Colony. She went through the rest of that whole postseason. She went through not chaotic, but a very lengthy AAU season with Capitals. Then went right into school soccer season with Catholic Central, and is now going right into school basketball season, all while trying to nurse the same physical ailment that she's had going back to January, February. So to see what she's been able to maintain from a talent perspective that whole time, there's been little to no drop off with her game. And that to me makes me absolutely crazy as to why now maybe she's waiting on purpose to make this decision, but I'm stunned there has been a college announcement about Navi Turpin by now. Like, I don't know what schools are waiting for, but y'all need to wake up. That's my flowers for her. The second part of it, if I had to name an X factor in determining what happens in Class AA, and it's a very specific X factor, and this is not me trying to put pressure on this one person, but I think it'll make sense to you. Lily Wolleber spent the last few years as essentially the 6-minute replacement for Taylor Holohan when she needed a break the last few years. Now, with Taylor gone, Lily becomes the linchpin essentially in the post for that squad. As obviously you have Ahern, you have Verardi, you have the guard play that you mentioned. But I think with Averill Park, and this might be viewed as a little unfair that I'm focusing on one specific player here, but I feel like that team is going to go as far as development of Lily Wolleber is going to go. And she's grown in AAU. She grew, over the last few years, whether it was as Taylor Holohan's replacement or working in tandem with Taylor when there was foul trouble with some of the guards and they wanted to go big at times. I feel like just how far AP goes is going to, in a way, go through how consistent Lily Wolleber is on the floor. I mean, is that bad judgment on my part, or do you kind of see that with me, Jeff?
Yeah, she made herself really valuable last year on the defensive end. That's where she kind of found her niche as far as being an impactful varsity player with that group around her last year, where she turned into the kid that Coach Oregon would put on the best player. And for the most part, regardless of position or skill set, he felt comfortable having her play against forwards. He felt comfortable having her play against more perimeter-based players. And, you know, she found her, not trying to pigeonhole her into one thing, but she found her value for that team really in that role. And I assume she's going to kind of carry that role into this year. But yeah, I mean, somebody like, you know, like Lily's offensive production turns them from a team that, you know, if she can be a reliable producer for them, she turns them from like a mid to upper 40s team to an upper 50s team. And, you know, that can be the difference between winning and losing a March playoff game or top of the line suburban. And, you know, and it's not like, you know, the Averill Park style, you know, it's not necessarily in the sense of like we're gonna get you 15 post touches a game and you got to produce for us. It's being an offensive rebounding presence and finishing around the rim. It's feeding off of Ari Verardi dribble penetration. It's shot clock gets low. You know, Coach Oregon likes to run the high ball screen. Then he's kind of done it with different kids over different years where the high ball screen running towards the middle of the floor. And last year it was, Ari and Taylor. And Taylor scored a lot off of it as the role player on that, you know, in that action. Ari scored a lot off of it because Taylor was so respected that you didn't really want to, you know, a big didn't really want to commit to a hard hedge. You know, they kind of wanted to stay home and drop coverage on Taylor or stay semi-glued to her. Lily being a late clock presence in that sort of action when teams like to match up against them. You know, that can, those sorts of points when you know you run fire and end up scoring after what you feel like is a good defensive possession and they still score with 3 left on the clock, those are back-breaking points too. So yeah, I mean, she's definitely established herself as somebody that was like a star in her role, but her role is different too. Her role is now expanded. So for sure. And yeah, with Navi too. I mean, yeah, irreplaceable. And unfortunately, there's always a couple kids that kind of slip through the cracks from a recruiting standpoint, and it's been considerably more over the last few years as everybody's COVID years kind of run out. So I think that is, I'm not going to speak for her, but I think that's a thing with her. You know, these are your options if you stay in the class of 25. These are your much larger list of options if you decide to do a post-grad year and go into 26, because the COVID years for everybody run out after this 25 class. So, you know, I think there's a lot of coaches that like her as a 26, but just don't have the place for her as a 25. But there are kids that, you know, just kind of like an undersized Barkley-ish of a 4. And you know, those are the sorts of kids that they're not going to get. As I brought up soda versus beer with Colony, right? She's a beer sort of player. You know, that's an acquired taste, which you watch her 5, 6, 7, 8 times. That's where you really start to realize, like, if she brings this to them, she brings this to the court every single time. She brings this sort of impact every single time. Those are the sorts of kids, when you have that with the physical tools, they can kind of slip through the cracks because she isn't 6'2". She's 5'9" or whatever she is, 5'8", 5'9", doing this. But the coaches that do recruit a kid like that love them. So there's a give and take to it, because there's the coaches, love the shiny medallion of the 6'1" kid, and maybe will falter on that. But if somebody is recruiting her, they love her, and they're going to be kind of favored going into whatever school, because that's somebody that coach is very, very high on.
Listen, I'm not going to reveal a name or a school, but there was a specific Colony alum who was in the gym Saturday night, who for that Catholic High Colony game, and I think she'd be crazy if she didn't go to her coaches at her school she just transferred to starting this year. You might be getting who I'm mentioning here because you know everything. Not really transferred. It was a forced transfer. If you're picking up what I'm putting down here, she'd be crazy not to go to her coaches and go, "Hey, look at this girl," because I think that conference, that player and school I'm referencing her in, she would be perfect in that conference. But I'll just if you pick up the innuendo, I'm pretty sure Jeff is. If you know who or what I'm referring to, good for you. If not, I'm going to keep it a mystery because I don't want to overstep my boundaries. All right, AAA to wrap things up. This is what because being able to see Shaker and Colony this past weekend, this is what I walked away with. The fact that I saw those two teams, and then I kept in mind you still have Albany in the background, you still have Shenandoah in the background, obviously, and then obviously the other three squads, Saratoga, Schenectady, and Guilderland. I just feel like these 7 Suburban Council teams, and really the Suburban Council in general, they're going to be dogfights the whole year. It's just going to be counterpunch after counterpunch, and whoever is left standing the healthiest and most learned from the experience is who's going to come out on top in the end. Because I just feel like it doesn't matter if it's up and down the court scoring 65, 70 points, or if it's lockdown D and the first team to 45 or 50 wins. This class, top to bottom, like I said, just it's going to be street fights on a regular basis in the most respectful, classiest basketball way possible that I could say that. That's the feeling I get coming away from this.
Yeah, it is what it is. In my coverage region, which does not include, I dabble in Long Island, but I'm not really there much. New York City, I'm not really there much. Outside of Section 1, which has a bunch of AAAs. So we're talking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 7, 9, and 10.
Yep.
The strongest class, honestly, is AA. It's not AAA. But there's a couple pockets where AAA basketball is really strong. Is very competitive. Section 2 is one of those places where you kind of have that power 4 right now. I would say Colony, Shaker, Shen, and Albany. You had a chance to see Colony and Shaker. We've already kind of discussed them at length. They can have maybe the relative targets on their back this year. Both made it to the championship last year. Both returned most of their rosters. Shaker added a very valuable piece. Both teams have kids that have kept the basketball in their hands throughout the spring, summer, and fall, and have improved as individual players going into this winter.
And by the way, that's wild because last year, from a seeding perspective, they pulled off the upset wins in the semis to set up that final, with Albany and Shen having been the 1 and 2. And now all of a sudden, it's kind of like roles totally reversed coming into this season, where, like you said, Shaker and Colony had the targets because they were the finalists. And now all of a sudden, Albany and Shen, this may be a bit of an exaggeration using this phrase, but it's almost like Albany and Shen are kind of an afterthought in a way because of that, the way that things played out in sectionals last year, and with how much talent that Shaker and Colony are bringing back. It's a weird dynamic, I think.
I think that is the local dynamic, and I also think that that's a dangerous one to follow.
Right.
That's and with Colony and Shaker being the 3 and 4, and the seeding played out as it did because of regular season performance, but you could see that Colony and Shaker, if you look at their rosters last year, where they were so heavily sophomore, junior oriented, you could see that they were the teams of the future. They just decided that the future was going to come a little bit sooner. They decided the future was in February, not this year.
Right.
So that was, it was going to flip. They just decided to flip it a little early, or maybe a little earlier than what the numbers in the regular season would have said. But yeah, I mean, that's they have the targets on their back. They have great talent. They've both improved. Shaker's added Malia. They have contrasting styles, because Colony is not going to work through the post. They will attack the rim. They will work through the paint off of
motion offense, pick and roll, but it's letting me a lot of dribble drive from. I mean, Tremarky might post up from time to time. Ali Payne might from time to time, but a lot of it is just. And this was something that actually got to. I feel like this kind of changed momentum a few times over the weekend against both O'Hara and Catholic Central for Colony was, and it kind of shocked me a little bit, the sheer speed Colony runs that motion offense. Mm-hmm. It's pretty wild, especially like Liv Hoffman. She is sneaky quick. And if you're not glued to her when they're running that motion offensive set, then you might as well just not even be on the court, because she will blow by you, drive to the paint, and get that lay-in.
95% of your game of basketball, unless you are a small point guard, is played off the ball. Not even 5% of the players that I watch have a true understanding of how to play basketball off the ball. We go to, we go to trainers, and we go to this and we go to that, and everything that I always see is on ball based work. Shot handle, dribble move, all that stuff. Very few players have a true understanding of how to play basketball, how to be effective, and how to be threats off the ball. Liv, and it's not just Liv and Ella, because I think that Caden plays well off the ball. Caden Cornell. I think Sid Pleat spaces the floor well. She relocates well, presents herself as a shooting option. So Ali Payne is a good, kind of instinctive diver to the rim. So I don't mean to just single out Liv and Ella, but Ella and Liv are two of the best off-ball players that I have ever covered in my time. And they just happen to be on the same team at the same school. They're two of the best off-ball players that I've ever covered. How instinctive they are moving off the ball, how quick their cuts are, how well-timed their cuts are. They're point guards' dreams to play with. If you play with, if they have an opportunity to play with it kind of completes that is someone like Aaliyah, right? Because you can be that, but if you don't have a good point guard, or if you don't have, you don't have a kind of an unselfish team that plays well off of each other, you can be that, at the same time, you can be that all you want. It doesn't impact, it doesn't make as much of a difference because you're making that right cut and the ball doesn't see you, or you're making that tremendous cut that draws two people and leaves a shooter in your ball side corner open, but the ball doesn't get over there. So like all the pieces fit with them. They're tremendous off-ball players. Their fluidity and their speed of cuts and their timing of cuts, and they're not just their ability to cut to score, but also their willingness to cut to space. Because a lot of times you have cutters that they cut to score, or they're willing to cut to score, if they see that back cut that's available for them to maybe get 2 points off of. But the cut to space to draw that secondary help defender that maybe sucks in Sid Pleat's defender that will now leave her semi-open. Players aren't unselfish enough to be willing to do that, and they have kids that are unselfish enough to be willing to do that. But so that's another notch on the belt for Colony. But then beyond that, when you talk about Shen and Albany, I've already brought up Shen, where I think they're just going to get better as the year goes on. They're figuring out their depth pieces, how deep they can go, and how deep they'll be willing to go when they play against better teams. But they have a good, intriguing, skilled starting five, where Maya Parker, I think, has really come along, and I think she's ready to be that lead guard as a junior. You got her classmates and Kate Milham and Gianna Winter, a good frontline duo that physically, you look at their measurables, they're similar as far as height and length and whatnot, but they bring very unique skill sets to the table, where Gianna, the length, activity, athleticism, everything at the rim, keeps possessions alive. She had an instance in the Penfield scrimmage on Sunday that Coach Vogt drew up an action to start up I think it was the fourth period, fourth or fifth. It was later on. It was back end of the scrimmage. And Coach Vogt from Penfield drew up a sideline out of bounds action he was trying to get something off of. And Gianna jumps the passing lane, like just runs up through midline, jumps the passing lane, gets a tip, tips it into the backcourt, ball goes out of bounds. It's still Penfield ball, so now it's an inbound in the backcourt. They try to get the ball in bounds. She does the same thing, jumps the passing lane again, steals it, turns it into a layup. The back end of a Sunday morning scrimmage, just kind of that energy that she brings. And then Kate Milham, skill-based, half-court offensive scorer that can space the floor, shoot the three, play off the shot, get to the rim, finish around the rim, play off the bounce, a little bit with post duck-ins, being able to finish over the either shoulder. And then your freshman wings with Kaylee Weber and Gianna Soden, that they're high level, two of the best freshmen that we have in our area. Where that's another group you're talking. Maya's a little smaller, and then your 2 through 5 are all like 5'9", 5'10", 5'11" range and long, wiry. I think their skill sets kind of fit each other, and they'll be a fun group to watch. They'll play fast. They'll space the floor. They'll be a fun group to watch as the season progresses. And then Albany's kind of the dark horse. They're X factor sort of thing. She's been around for 43 years, so maybe people forget that Azira Gates is still here, but she's still here. She was giving people the business when she was in 7th grade. She's the only player. She's a pre-COVID kid, right? She's the only player around here that she was a varsity impact player before the world shut down, and she's still here. So. And she'll still be here after this year. She's going up the road to Siena.
Yeah, and I still have the 2020 sectionals program to prove it for Gates, because she was listed as an 8th grader back, 7th grader back then.
7th grader.
I still have the 2020 program to prove it. You would, it's weird how these players are around forever and then you forget about them at certain points just because like last year, just to touch on Albany as like you were, I feel like she almost kind of became an afterthought in certain games because they relied a lot more on their stretch athletes that had more length and height to them in certain games, and Azir just kind of got a little, lack of a better phrase, lost in the shuffle in a few of those games. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with her in her senior year, to see how she fits in with the composition of this year's team.
Yeah, I mean she's the most powerful point guard presence in Section 2. That's somebody that just a relentless presence that gets paint touches basically at will, like sort of kid that you can kind of build an offensive unit around. Just whatever your defensive game plan is, she finds a way to kind of shred it up, and you have to be in scramble mode against her because she's a dynamic athlete that's just quick, and that's quick enough to at least get to everybody's hip, whether she blows by people or what, she can at least get to your hip. But once she gets to your hip, she's too strong. Other point guards can't create an angle to get back in front. So she draws 2 or 3 bodies all the time. Floor spacing is going to be a question mark for them. I think that was a big thing when they won those couple section championships. They had kids that could shoot the 3. So they had AZ that was able to get to the rim and draw multiple bodies. They had kids around her that could shoot the 3. They had Ayanna Whedon that could shoot it. They had Amari Scott coming off the bench. They could shoot it. Shanye Edmonds, who was a tremendous athlete that could do damage around the rim. She also developed into a shooter. Like, they had those kids that could stretch the floor. I don't know if they have that right now. Maybe there's somebody coming up that I'm unfamiliar with, but this looks like to me, from what I know, this looks like a team that's like all out assault on the rim. They did pick up an interesting transfer, as far as I'm aware, in Chastani Francis Torres, who was one of Kingston's go-to kids for the last couple of years. Kind of a like an Allie Payne sort of frame, maybe like average height but strong build forward that can mix it up around the rim, but also has the ability to stretch to the arc and shoot it. So that's an interesting piece for them to work in. We play Albany. It's always a rock fight. It's always physical. They get after you. They make you uncomfortable, and that's a team. Like, they still, we're not even talking. People aren't even talking about them. They still have Azir Gates. Like, I'm not so willing to just, like, I get it. This doesn't look like a complete team to me. They don't check all the boxes, but I mean, they have AZ. I'm not just going
to automatically throw in the towel on them when they still have.
I'm not just gonna write them off. So it's gonna be an interesting 4 in AAA this year for sure.
Well, my man, that covers all the 6 classes. We covered our travels in the past week. So yeah. Anything last minute you wanted to throw in there? You mentioned how the back of this week is laid out. Where are you looking at for the back end of this week?
Back end of this week, I'm going to be out of the area. I'm going to miss out. So there's some, if you're a Section 2 fan and you want to watch basketball this week, there's some good stuff to watch in this area. I'll give a couple examples. Brought up the Averill Park tournament on Friday and Saturday with Bethlehem Columbia and then Niski Averill Park. And then I think it's, just consolation championship traditional on that Saturday. That should be a fun watch. There's also an annual event up in Queensbury on Friday and Saturday, the Michelle Bennett Memorial Classic, named after obviously Michelle Bennett, really respected area basketball presence that passed away unexpectedly a couple of years back. The mother of Grace Ann Bennett and Kenzie Bennett, the Lake George standouts in the 2010s. Ken's played at Keene State in New Hampshire, and Grace Ann had a strong career at Georgetown. And Coach Bethel has done a great job of kind of putting something together in her name. That's when she passed, she was on the staff at Queensberry. So Friday, Saturday, there's a triple header of games. It's all foothills versus non-foothills. I saw the flyer. I don't remember exactly what the matchups are off the top of my head, but I can say that it's Queensberry, Glens Falls, and Hudson Falls from the foothills, and then Ballston Spa, Corinth, and then Walnut Grove from Georgia for the non-foothills. Walnut Grove, Kenzie Bennett coaches them. So they're making the trip up from Georgia for the Friday, Saturday games. So that's something, especially Northern Section 2. Queensberry, a few hours. You get to watch 6 teams, 3 games, both Friday night and Saturday afternoon. Couple other interesting games, like good non-leaguer on Friday. Stillwater plays at Guilderland. I believe that's at least what I have on the schedule. So you got the backcourts, Addie and Miranda and Maddie. We've talked at length, and then Guilderland with Brooke Lilly and Christina Williams. I will not be in the area the back end of this week, but I will be watching a Section 2 team on Friday. Friday, I plan to go down to Delaware Academy, Delhi. They have the Dick Alwine Memorial Tournament. I don't know if it's Memorial or not. Just the Dick Alwine tip-off tournament. That's predetermined matchups because they have 2 teams from the same league that they don't want to have play each other. For my money, that's always about as good of a small school tournament as there is throughout the year. Going back a few years where they had a lineup that was Delhi the year that they won the Class D state championship, with Cambridge, which was the first year of like the Phillips Twins run when they made the state semifinal. Cooperstown, when they still had a Division I player in Julie Ford, which was like a tremendous small school tournament probably 6 years ago. This might be the best field since then. Delhi and Unitigo from that area, who are both factors in Section 4, Class C. Cooperstown is back in it. And Greenwich is down there. So Greenwich, I think, plays the day I'll be there. I think Greenwich plays Delhi. And then it's Tego Cooperstown. Saturday, I'm going out to Elmira. The Elmira women's coach, Thad Phillips, puts together a high school hoops shootout with his, trying to get all of his local teams in the gym. So 5 games at Elmira College on Saturday. Starts with some of the smaller schools like the Elmira Notre Dame and Odessa Montour and those sorts of schools. And then it picks up like Ithaca plays Union Springs. Horseheads will play West Genesee, who's coming in from Syracuse, and then Corning Waverly. Sunday, I'm probably going down to Poughkeepsie to watch the Our Lady of Lourdes tip-off tournament, which Saratoga is making the trip down for. They do every year. I believe that's Lourdes, reigning AAA state champion, a very new-look team this year. Graduated a ton, but with Lourdes, Toga, Arlington High School from that area, and Kennedy Catholic, who looks like talent-wise they're going to be a strong group this year from Somers and Westchester County. Who they're also Kennedy Catholic is making the trip up here in a few weeks, which I'm sure we will talk about in late December. They're playing at a Christmas tournament. Holy Names are going to be playing against Albany High.
Mm-hmm.
So So yeah, that's what I'm doing. But if you're a local fan of Section 2 basketball, you got AP on Friday, Saturday. You got Queensbury Friday, Saturday. You've got the Burnt Hills Broad Albin little combo tournament where they have Troy and Scotia in. I think they play at Burnt Hills on Friday and Broad Albin Saturday. There's a doubleheader at Warrensburg Friday and Saturday, Section 2 versus Section 7 with Warrensburg and Whitehall, and they have Peru, who's probably maybe Section 7's most talented team, and Northeastern Clinton coming down. So it picks up back into this week. My travel this week, I'll go watch Cobleskill tonight. Still figuring out the front end of this week. There might be a Utica trip. I might go do that Hartford Spa Catholic game. But yeah, back end of this week, hitting the road. Oneonta, or Delhi, which is basically Oneonta, Elmira, Poughkeepsie.
Getting miles in. I like it.
Yeah, picking up a rental.
All right. Okay.
Sure.
Just to verify, by the way, real quick. Number one, Stillwater Guilderland. That's Friday, 6 p.m. at Guilderland. That game. And then the second thing I just saw that was interesting because you mentioned how Greenwich. This is their first 4 games of the season. Friday night, Delhi. Saturday afternoon, Unitigo. Then they're home next Monday and Thursday, but they're not pushovers. Mechanicville and then Stillwater. So that's a challenging way to start off your first weekend. Not even. It's 4 competitive games in a 7-day stretch to start the season for Greenwich. So they'll definitely be ballot tested early and often over the next almost 2 weeks, and I'm sure we'll touch on that.
It's a good start. I'll probably see 2 of them because I look at that game against Stillwater. I'm like, I feel like I can't not go. I have my schedule spreadsheet all taken care of, but I don't know what else is. I haven't really looked at what else is going on next Thursday, but that's one of. There's certain games that pop up where I kind of think like I can't not go to it.
Yeah.
However, it's I can't not do it. And that one feels like one that's like, I'm not sure if I have to look at the rest of the schedule. I should probably go to that.
Yeah, totally understand that. Well, Jeff, tremendous season debut for you. Great work as always. So safe travels, and we'll catch up same bat time, same bat station here next week. Thanks, Jeff.
See you next week.